So,
I can't get it.
okay, thank you all so much. If you don't mind, I'm just gonna mute some of us just so we can't hear the background noise. But feel free to unmute yourself
You can't mess that up.
if you have any questions. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen, and we're gonna continue where we left off last time. Okay, so just want to make sure that everyone can see. I should have the background music for Indiana Jones. Dun 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 dun. Excellent film. Yeah, sing along, right? Classic. And this film came out in 1981. Wow. And Harrison Ford, and I certainly know the song by the line, Harrison Ford's a quarter Jewish, not too shabby. That's from the famous Hanukkah song by Adam Sandler. And I did a bit of research, and actually the quarter Jewish of Harrison Ford, see, Adam Sandler, I'm not sure how knowledgeable he is in halacha, but it's Harrison Ford's mother's mother. So one of his four grandparents, the one that counts, is Jewish. So that means that Harrison Ford is wholly, not a quarter, but he is 100% Jewish, according to halacha, despite his father's side and whatnot. So that's Harrison Ford, an excellent actor. And we all remember the film. And it was, there was, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to show you a scene from the film, which, I mean, Steven Spielberg, you could just see there's so much Jewish content. It's rich with Jewish history and, of course, imagination. Let's watch a short clip. Sorry, maybe just some background information in case you haven't seen Raiders of the Lost Ark. But, essentially the Ark of the Covenant, okay, in the film is actually, of all people who discovered it and stole it, own it, it's the Nazis this takes place during World War II. But of course, it's historical fiction, or, even beyond that, very heavy on the fiction side. And the Nazis are on a pursuit to find the Holy Ark of the Temple. And Harrison Ford is this American professor, and he's trying to get to it before the Nazis do. And in this scene, you could see this German Nazi who is, obsessed with Jewish history, with temple history, etc. And he got the Ark in this scene, and he finally got it. And that's why you can see Harrison Ford and his girlfriend are tied up in the scene. They're trying to do something about it, and all these soldiers surrounding here are Nazis. Okay, so this is the scene where the Nazis are surrounded by the Holy Ark of the Great Temple of Jerusalem. And what happens to them, we'll find out. Spoiler alert, in case you want to watch it. What they find inside the Ark, nothing but sand. A huge disappointment. That's inside the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Ark.
Don't look at it. Shut your eyes, Mary, and don't look at it no matter what happens.
So basically, it's just incredible. Steven Spielberg's Judaism and his imagination is so apparent here. You see the holiness of the temple, the Shekhinah, the Kedusha, of the temple that once stood in Jerusalem is being used to harm Nazis. Really incredible. And the imagination of Steven Spielberg swept many people, many archaeologists, going back to 1981, and there were real life versions of Indiana Jones, and people were searching for the lost Ark in Jerusalem. And in fact, underneath in the Muslim quarter in Jerusalem, there were searchers that claimed to have found the Ark, though they didn't want to open it, right? And it was near the Kotel's tunnel end, and we spoke about this at the end of last class. The former rabbi of the Western Wall, Rabbi Getz, who was this mystic. He was also in the IDF, and he was praying and crying every night for the destruction of the temple. He felt very, very close, and he was on a mission to find this holy ark. So he reached Warren's Gate, and he found a 2-foot wide hole leading into the sacred platform's interior, below the Dome of the Rock, below where the Holy of Holies once was. Rabbi Getz, he cried, he prayed. He entered this small hole. This was all done illegally, okay, and secretly. And he stood in this large hall, which very, very, very few people have entered this actual area. And Rabbi Getz, he suspected that this passageway where he is, it was used by the priest, the high priest as well, to access the Jewish temple before it was blocked. He called afterwards as he entered this incredible secretive area, ancient area of the temple, just below the Holy of Holies. And he calls on the two chief rabbis, Rabbi Goren and Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who Rabbi Goren we spoke about last week. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef was the Sephardi chief rabbi at this time in the 1980s. And he also called on a Kabbalist called Rabbi Abu Chatzira to join him and check it out. So the four of them went back to this secret, top secret. Nobody knew about it. They went inside. The four of them recited Tehillim. A few days later, Rav Ovadia Yosef ordered that this hall below the Holy of Holies be turned into a synagogue. No media coverage of this event, and it was kept top secret. Here you could see a picture. This is Rabbi Getz at the bottom. And I have to do some explanations of the background story to this picture, because that's not Rav Ovadia Yosef in the background. In fact, those are not Jews. Those are our cousins who eventually made their way into there. So the secret eventually got out, that there was this clandestine dig that was occurring beneath the homes in the Muslim quarter. It was a political minefield waiting to explode. Mayor Teddy Kollek of Jerusalem intended to send in the police the following day to shut down immediately what was seen as an illegal attempt to dig under the Temple Mount. When the media reported on this, Knesset members, they displayed shock and anger. They said they knew nothing about what these four rabbis were up to, mostly Rabbi Getz. They distanced themselves from this penetration into the Temple Mount, and the passageway was immediately temporarily blocked. Okay? It was blocked again. Later that day, after they blocked it, and word was spread. Hundreds of Arabs came into this area with building materials to seal up the walls themselves. Rabbi Getz came down to the hall among these many Arabs that were there. As you can see in the picture, already not such a young man at this stage. His wife hears what Rabbi Getz is doing. Rabbi Getz did not fear no one, only God. And his wife, though she was scared, she panicked. She called on Jewish people praying at the Kotel to help protect her husband from what she thought was going to be a riot and a mauling. He called on Rabbi Goren, okay, at this time, somehow he had access to a phone before cell phones, to come to his aid, to help him out. Rabbi Goren, the Ashkenazi chief rabbi, when he arrived, he saw what he describes as hundreds of police officers, okay, and hurried to the area where he claims there were also hundreds of Arab, of Muslims, crying, shouting. Rabbi Getz said the police fled, so he called on boys from a yeshiva nearby. I think it was the Ater Kohanim yeshiva, and a few other hundreds came, and they came with weapons. So this was going to get heated, a real battle taking place right next to, below the Holy of the Holies. Issam Awad, who is the Waqf, who the Waqf are the Muslim religious authorities overlooking the Temple Mount, he ordered that they seal up the wall immediately. They don't want Jews penetrating into their holy sites. And version of the story was that there were about 10 or 15 Arab workers who came with bricks and mortar. There were no weapons involved, right? And 10 yeshiva students came in and they attacked 10 workers, right? Different versions of the story of what actually happened. Policemen arrived in riot gear to separate the two groups. So we have Rabbi Getz's version of the story. We have the Waqf version of the story. Rabbi Getz, his version is that there was a lot more people and a lot more violence that was threatened at the time. But in the end, this bloodbath, however, whatever the scale was prevented by the police coming in. There were Jews and there were Arabs, both who were arrested, and 2 people were slightly injured. So in the end, what could have been a horrible, riot, violence was quite moderate in the end. Later, it was revealed that Rabbi Getz and Rabbi Goren were searching, just like Indiana Jones, for the lost ark, the Aron HaKodesh. And they were guided by Maimonides, Rambam, the great rabbi who lived in Egypt about 1,000 years ago. And he wrote that King Solomon anticipated the temple's destruction, so he built a structure in which to hide the ark down below, deep and twisting and concealed places. The legend of the lost ark it's a non-Jewish invention, says the Temple Institute director Chaim Richman. He says, we know where it is located. The problem is reaching it. Rabbi Getz's daughter said after his death in 1995, when he passed away, I've said this story a few times and I struggle to believe it. But when you hear these stories and they're hard to believe, I guess to verify its truth or not, its veracity, is the source of the story. And this is coming from the chief rabbi of the Western Wall. So that's quite a religious, holy, pious source. I'll tell you the story and you be the judge. Rabbi Getz told his daughter, and his daughter shared it after his death, that he was indeed looking for the ark for many, many years in order to bring the Messiah. He was willing to risk his life for it. This was part of the redemption that comes with resurrection. She also said that her father met with the Mossad head, Rafi Eitam, who was involved in finding the ark. They met with somebody named Hanan Avraham, who was an Israeli mystic, and some pseudo-psychologists who would have seance. And he brought down prominent Israelis in his life, like he channeled Yitzhak Rabin to speak with him after he had died. And the two asked Abraham, Rafi Yetam, and Rabbi Getz, they asked this mystic Abraham, who showed them a map and showed them where the temple treasures were hidden. In 1993, Rabbi Getz wrote, I can confirm to you that we know the exact location of the Ark of the Covenant. As you can understand it, the subject is very delicate, and we are not interested at all to diffuse any such information to anyone. So, according to Rabbi Getz, who's no longer with us, he knows the exact location, and he worked with the Mossad to locate the exact location. And theoretically, if you were to go in the Western Wall tunnels and you had, and it wouldn't cause World War III, you can dig through and you could see where the Ark is. As Rabbi Richmond says, it's not even a lost Ark. It's just Steven Spielberg and others who call it a lost Ark. We know exactly where it is. In December of 1987, the first Intifada broke out. 6 months later, Dan Bahat, who was a radical secularist archaeologist, he quietly opened the old stairway of the Western Wall tunnels that leads to the Via Dolorosa, which is where Jesus took his last steps as he was being crucified. And that's in the Christian quarter. So the Western Wall tunnels, the exit of that is what he quietly opened up in the midst of the first Intifada, because you can't have a tunnel that has one opening. You need to, if you're digging, you need all the excess dirt. It's dysfunctional if there's just one entrance and exit point. You need both sides. Within 2 hours of this opening in the Via Dolorosa, the street was filled with an angry Arab demonstration. Police arrived and they were forced to even use tear gas in response to Arab violence. Again, the tensions in Israel were already tense with the Intifada that broke out. Then Bahat immediately agreed to close this exit. He was soon meeting Pope John Paul II and about Jerusalem archaeology and their discoveries, and he didn't want the rioting in the background in this important meeting that he had. In 1990, after 22 years of work, and you could see the Western Wall tunnel over here where it is under the Muslim quarter, that's the Western Wall, okay? And I'm sure some of us have actually walked through the Western Wall tunnel. It's a very, very popular tourist attraction today. But we have to learn about the history of how we got to where we are today. In 1990, after 22 years of work, the tunnel was finally open to the public, but without an exit to the north end. So people were walking in and it's very claustrophobic, and you'd have traffic going both ways in a narrow, very tight tunnelway. This led to horrible conditions and a real serious fire hazard. The head of the Western Wall Heritage Site pleaded with the government to open the northern exit of the tunnel, but the government was reluctant with the Intifada that was actually waning by 1990. They didn't want it to reignite. As you can see, somewhere around here is the exit point that was so controversial. By 1993, you can see the picture over here, when there were the Oslo Accords signed, this tunnel exit was definitely not going to open during peace negotiations. So much of Jerusalem archaeology is every decision is, of course, very political, and the political climate shapes the archaeology, and archaeology shapes a lot of the politics. So they really go hand in hand.
Excuse me.
Yes.
They've excavated underneath the plaza a whole new area of Jerusalem under the ground.
Yep.
With a huge plaza for dinners and to make into a synagogue when they have to, or a lecture hall or whatever, and it's absolutely magnificent. And
Were you there?
yes, I was.
Beautiful. When were you there? How recent?
After the lockdown, Rabbi Rabinovich gave some Hebrew University people permission to go through, and they were still hammering and people were still wearing hard hats and stuff like that. But a lot of it was already finished, and it's going to be magnificent.
Yeah, yeah. I was there as well. Very beautiful. And there's so much more. We're jumping. You know, we're still 30 years ago, even 35 years ago. Back in 1990 right now. But yeah, thank you. I mean, we're still talking about the same site, but I want to chronologically take us there. So we're right now still talking about the 1990s, but I mean, you're already telling us what it looks like today. But there was a lot that brought Jerusalem to where we are today, and that the Western Wall Plaza.
Okay.
So going back to the 1990s, Jerusalem was celebrating 3,000 years. Teddy Kollek was still the mayor of Jerusalem, and he's celebrating 3,000 years since King David's conquest. They had an event in the city of David in 1995. Yitzhak Rabin, this is of his last month of his life, and he was prime minister. He attended, and Rabin said, 3,000 years of history look down upon us today from the city from whose stones the ancient nation sprang. Yasser Arafat and the PLO's response to Jerusalem 3000 was that Jerusalem is not 3,000 years old. It's 5,000 years old. And Arafat said that we, the Palestinians, are descendants from the Jebusites, whom the Israelites conquered King David, right? So the story, the narrative changes all the time of their historical connections to the land, right? Of course, there's no record of this whatsoever. This is the first that anyone ever heard of a connection of the Jebusites and the modern day Palestinians, but Yasser Arafat made that claim. They, he said, were the original landlords of Jerusalem, and Arafat said, our forefathers, the Canaanites and the Jebusites, built the cities and planted the land. The walk of Jordan, called Dan Bahat, and this is now we're shifting from the Western Wall tunnels, which we'll go back to it, because we also have to talk about Solomon's Stables, as you can see over here, which is in the southeast corner below the Temple Mount. So I'm going to shift and talk about this, but they're both related to one another. Okay. In January of 1996, the Waqf of the area of Jordan calls Dan Bahat, who is one of the archaeologists of the area, who oversaw the Western Wall Tunnel excavation, and the Waqf explained that during Ramadan, they're expecting heavy rains in 1996 and larger crowds. And they wanted to turn Solomon's Stables into a temporary sheltered prayer area. It's in this, and as I said, and according to some experts, this area that they wanted to now turn into a mosque, a roofed mosque, not just the Temple Mount area, but have some shelter from the rain and expand the area. According to some experts, the Solomon Stables, despite the name, was not built by King Solomon. It was built by Muslims even before the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock was built 691. So this was built a decade or two prior to that, and making it the world's oldest existing Islamic structure. Built by Muslims. Mecca, Medina, these were holy sites before Muhammad that they just converted into Muslim sites. The Crusaders filled the space when the Crusaders were there, and they used the Al-Aqsa Mosque as their headquarters. That was in the 1200s, 1100s as well. And it was later emptied. And for 800 years, this Solomon Stables, which was named by the Crusaders, was abandoned. It wasn't used. Bahat, the archaeologist, agreed on the condition, if they want to use this as a mosque, let's make a trade. let us open up the Western Wall tunnel and they could exit out the Via Dolorosa. Give us what we've been asking for a very long time. Let tourists see ancient Jerusalem, exit out the Western Wall tunnels, and in turn, you guys will get Solomon's stables and use it as a mosque. Sounds like a fair deal. No side was thrilled about it, but the other side was getting, but they silently agreed begrudgingly. This is what it looks like today, okay? You can see it's turned into a mosque, both sides, Al-Warmani Mosque. And at the time, Yitzchak Shamir, I was talking about him before. That's one of the times that I had a nice conversation with Erwin Cutler at the funeral of Yitzchak Shamir in Jerusalem. And this going back in 1983 when Yitzchak Shamir was prime minister, he suggested that this should be a synagogue. But of course, those plans didn't go through. At this time, when there was this trade going on, 1996 or 1995, Peres was prime minister. It was shortly after Rabin was assassinated, and Bibi was in the opposition. Peres was moving Oslo and would give in Oslo, all of this would belong to the PA anyway. There was a Muslim leader representing the Palestinian Authority named Sheikh Raed Salah Abu Shakra. Don't ask me to repeat that one. He was taken on a tour of the Western Wall tunnel, and afterwards he told the Israel Antiquities Authority, he said, because this was an exclusively Muslim sacred area, archaeological data are of no relevance to the Islamic identity of the site. Muslim believers need no further proof to reinforce. So in a blanket statement, basically they're saying any kind of Jewish historical ties, archaeology, it's all Zionist propaganda. This is a Muslim site, end of story. The Israel Antiquities Authority, he later wrote about this, and he said, in his view, scientific research at such a site contradicts the religious character, and any such research at the site could be avoided. Muslims rejected, therefore, opening up the tunnel exit. So they took back their word. They got the mosque. The other part of the deal was Israel can open up the exit of the Western Wall tunnels. And that was not to happen. And like today, the political tension was tense. Rabin was assassinated. They're moving forward with Oslo. Peres is now, pushing forward with Oslo, and everyone's walking on eggshells, and nobody wants to, anger the other side too much. So the Palestinians got the mosque, but the Israelis did not get the exit under Shimon Peres. Okay. The Muslims now turn it into a mosque, but Bibi, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is prime minister today, and he was prime minister then. And this is when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was a fresh, new, rookie prime minister. And the mayor, Ehud Olmert, they ordered a halt to the construction of this mosque, and also pretty much a halt to the whole Oslo peace treaty. The Grand Mufti of Jerusalem argued that this is out of Israeli jurisdiction. If Israeli police entered it, there's going to be a bloodbath. There was a group of, let's call them far right-wing Jews, the Temple Mount faithful, very connected to the Temple Mount. As the name suggests, they went to the high court this time to prevent the Grand Mufti and to prevent, basically to prevent the Muslims from continuing to build and turn into a mosque. But the Israeli Antiquities Authorities assured that no major changes in the infrastructure of the building is going to be done. Bibi's government eventually approved once they weren't going to change much at all to the area. As the Muslims build their mosque, Bibi gives the green light to open the exit to the Western Wall tunnels on the northern side. The Shin Bet, the Israeli security, begged to postpone this to avoid any violence, but it was refused. Bibi understood that this was a deal that was made before him becoming prime minister, and now that deal is becoming implemented. And now we see the Jerusalem Post from September 25th, 1996. Tunnel opening sparked Arab protests. And I'm sure many of us remember this story. I remember I was in high school at the time when this was really the first major challenge that Bibi Netanyahu had as prime minister. The exit was opened. Mayor Ehud Olmert pushed for this and added a message to the Palestinian Authority that we're not playing games here. Not everything in Jerusalem is going to be subject to negotiation. He himself took a sledgehammer in the ceremonial opening of this exit. One of the observers who was there was the Grand Mufti, Sabri, calls Yasser Arafat, tells him the Jews are digging under the Temple Mount. Within an hour, this is before WhatsApp, this is before Signal, this is before whatever, social media, before the Arab Spring, but somehow word spread very quickly. Hundreds of Arabs are marching in the old city. Police fired rubber bullets to prevent them from the sites. The crowds got bigger. They started to shout from the minarets, Jews are penetrating into the Temple Mount. Arabs started throwing rocks from the Temple Mount to the Kotel Plaza. The Arab world united, demonstrating in many countries against Israel. Bibi at the time was in Europe, and he told the media, quote, all we did was allow visitors of all faiths to go out the exit rather than make a U-turn. There is no truth that we are digging under the Temple Mount, end quote. Protests and riots among Palestinians got worse. For the first time, the Palestinian Authority personnel were in battle against the IDF. Within 2 days, there were 4 Palestinians killed and 240 injured. This was seen by the international community as the first major turn Israel took against Oslo peace. The EU leaders condemned Israel. And the next day, day 2, 39 Palestinians and 11 Israeli soldiers are killed. Blood spilt on both sides. President Clinton of the United States takes a diplomatic role, blaming both sides for the violence. Bibi asserted again the tunnel poses no threat. The Palestinians are turning this into a religious issue of fanaticism, and these riots were all organized and planned beforehand. Bill Clinton then invites Yasser Arafat and Bibi to the White House in a peace effort. Arafat said, only if Israel closes the tunnel. Bibi said Arafat has to condemn the violence. Clinton then blames Bibi for instigating the violence. Kind of like what we see happening in the news these days, and the media and international politics. There are always the same, similar kind of stories. Here's a rare picture of Benjamin Netanyahu shaking hands with Yasser Arafat. And in the middle, that's King Hussein of Jordan. In the background over here, that's Vice President Al Gore. Okay.
Madeleine Albright.
Is she in the picture? Oh, yeah. Good,
right
good.
Hussein.
Okay, very good. So that's 5 out of the 6 people. Anyone know who this person is? I don't. I'm not sure.
Russian.
Russian. My guess would be American, but who knows? Who knows? But 5 out of 6. Very good. Thanks for pointing out Madeleine Albright as well. I'm sure this is not one of Bibi's proud moments in this picture. Arafat and Netanyahu agreed to meet at the White House for a 2-hour talk. They agree eventually how to jointly police the holy city of Hebron after there was the Baruch Goldstein massacre, which could be a possible template for Jerusalem as well by splitting up the areas. 4 days of violence, 74 Palestinians, 16 IDF soldiers are all killed. Over 1,000 Palestinians and 58 Israelis are wounded. There's just because of the opening of the Western Wall exit. There's ample evidence that Jews had deep roots in Jerusalem, but also Arabs controlled the city for nearly 1,400 years, longer and more recently than the Jews. We've shed enough of our blood, and we are not willing to pay more for a tunnel, said an Israeli protester at the time. By the end of 1996, Solomon Stables, now called Marwani Mosque, was holding prayers for over 5,000 worshippers at a time, and tourists can now exit the tunnels at the Via Dolorosa with IDF security and it soon became Jerusalem's third most popular tourist attraction after the Kotel and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is a picture of the Temple Mount. So the western wall would be on this end, which is out of the picture. And that's the western side. So this is the eastern side. This is the southern side, and that's the southeastern corner. Okay. Now that the Palestinians are using this as a mosque, they're asking now for more. And what they are, ironically, after putting up such a fuss for the Western Wall tunnels to be opened, now they're asking that they build over here an opening for the mosque, because otherwise it's a fire hazard and people coming in and out, and it's safer, etc. So they want, now that they have their mosque over here at Solomon Stables, they want a safe entrance and exit. So in December of 1999, the WACF begins making and building this to avoid any kinds of fire hazards, etc. And they unilaterally excavate the area of the Temple Mount with 3 bulldozers and several dump trucks. They use more than 30 dump trucks. The prime minister secretly okayed this, Benjamin Netanyahu, as they didn't want any tensions leading up to the year 2000. I'm sorry, by 1999, I think it was already Ehud Barak. So Ehud Barak okays this, and he didn't want any tensions leading up to 2000, with many Catholic tourists coming in. There was the Jerusalem syndrome, if you remember, Y2K, all kinds of issues leading up to January 1st of 2000. They wanted Jerusalem to be quiet, so they let the Palestinians do what they wanted to and open up the exit. And they didn't want to take blame if there was a stampede and anything would occur, killing many. Unfortunately, what Israel experienced in Meron on Lag BaOmer a few years ago, these kind of religious stampedes, they didn't want responsibility, so it would be in their interest for there to be safety on the Temple Mount for Muslim worshippers. But they didn't have permission to use bulldozers on the historical Holy Temple Mount. This man over here, his name is Yehuda Etzion. He's an advocate for Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount, okay, part of the Temple Mount faithful. He's quite controversial. He actually was part of a plot to blow up the Dome of the Rock in the early 1980s. He and his co-conspirator, Menachem Livni, hoped that by destroying the Dome of the Rock, that would trigger a war between Israel and the Arab neighbors, and from then, only Israel would emerge victorious. This would then trigger the building of the Third Temple and a recreation of the Kingdom of Israel. This is why people like myself feel Messianism can be taken, if taken too far, can be very, very dangerous. And if he was successful in that, it would be nice if maybe the plans were to go through, but there's no guarantees of that. And it could actually be disastrous for the Jewish people. So he was caught in prison for it. And he was released from prison. In August of 1999, he had said that the only thing I'm sure of is that the Dome of the Rock is a temporary building. It must come to an end. When and how, I cannot say. So this Yehuda Etzion, who, his heart and soul is the Temple Mount, he learned that all the material from the Temple Mount that they were digging up was being dumped in the municipal garbage dump just outside the old city, and he immediately reported it to Israeli archaeologists. He was the one who always had his eyes on the Temple Mount. So as you can see in the picture over here, this is the Temple Mount, and this is what the Palestinians are using under Yasser Arafat. And, this is incredibly painful for anyone who values the Temple Mount Jewish history. The holy Temple Mount where the first and the temple stood, and they're digging it up and just disregarding everything. And who knows What kind of treasures are buried in that earth? A few amateur archaeologists went to this garbage dump and they found old pottery shards. That was just the first initial run when they heard the rumor. When Muslims witnessed along with the walk had told them, leave the site immediately. He told the Jewish archaeologist. The walk said that this was done with permission of the prime minister and the mayor Olmert, and they'll be attacked if they return to the site. They were also told that they should not be planting any Jewish coins or anything like that, and then later claimed there was a Jewish temple once on the platform. He said they only found Christian and Muslim remains there. They went back and brought security and quickly realized that there is gold buried underneath this trash. When I say gold, I'm not talking literal, although there is literal gold, but there's evidence of the temple, archaeological evidence of the Jewish temple that they are trashing. They've done it in their words by denying that there ever was a temple on the Temple Mount, and they're now doing it with their actions by throwing it all in the garbage. There was still hostilities by Arab youth by the garbage dump, but it wasn't as serious as other riots that have happened. So they brought some of the findings to this man over here, Gabi Barkai. Gabi Barkai is a very well-known Jerusalem archaeologist. He discovered, his famous Israeli's greatest discovery is the silver scrolls over here. And I don't know if anyone's seen them. They're in the Israel Museum. They are tiny, the silver scrolls. I'm going to rip a piece of paper and show you the approximate size. It's probably smaller than this piece of paper, okay? Wow. Wow. And tiny, and it's silver. And he found it in the early 1980s, just outside of Menachem Begin, the Menachem Begin Heritage Center. There are some first temple period tombs there, Jewish tombs. And it was rolled up. And they weren't sure what to do. Should they try to open up this ancient scroll? And on one hand, if they open it up, they could decipher what's inside. On the other hand, if they open it up, we're talking about 2,700 years old, it can crumble and be destroyed. They took the risk and they opened it up. They opened it up, and what did they discover as they opened it up? And you can see over here, ancient Paleo-Hebrew script. And what does it say? Not sure how the crowd, how your Hebrew is. You can recognize it's kind of hard because it's not all linear. It's kind of choppy, but it says, Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Hashem panav elecha, Yasem lecha shalom.
Priestly blessing.
Correct. This is not only the priestly blessing, but it's a verse from the Bible. It is the oldest verse in the Bible that has been discovered, 700 years older than the Dead Sea Scrolls. Wow. And it's the first mention ever discovered of God's name, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. So Gabi Barkai found the gold. He found the treasure. And that was his fame. And, we're talking about a story in the year 2000. And this is already a good 15 years after the Silver Scrolls discovery. Now, Gabi Barkai, on a personal note, was my teacher of archaeology when I took the tour guide course in Jerusalem. So I studied many hours under him and went on many tours of archaeological sites with him. And, he is just the typical old school Israeli archaeologist. I mean, I'm surprised in the picture. You can only see one hand, but I'm assuming in the other hand, there's a cigarette, because whenever I saw him, he always had a cigarette in his mouth. And he loves Jewish history. He lived Jewish history, loves Israel. He was born in a DP camp from his parents were Holocaust survivors, values Jewish tradition in a serious way, has a raspy voice, speaks English very well. and has a good sense of humor as well. And he's, he should live and be well until 120. So he's still digging, still working. He works at the Sifting Project if you get a chance to go, and we'll talk about that. Anyways,
excuse me, I took
yes.
I took a course with him at the City of David in English one
Excellent.
summer.
So
yeah, he was a terrific teacher.
There you go. 2 fans of Gabi Barkai. Okay, Carol, I see you. You've been to Israel a lot, and you know a lot of the sites.
Well, I
hope
there
you're
part-time.
Oh, you do currently?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Where's your place? What part of Israel?
Right up the hill from the Menachem Begin Center in Abu Tor, right on top of the train station.
Beautiful. Great location. That's amazing. Amazing. So, okay. I would love to chat more and hear about this, but let's go on with the course. But I hope you're learning new stuff here. You seem to know a lot. But review is always good as well. Okay, so let's continue. Thank you, Carol. So Gabi Barkai, and if you see him, send him my regards if he remembers me. He is as we said, famous for the Silver Scrolls, and he was excited to hear about this work and researching this holy trash, right? So on January 6th of the year 2000, Barkai, that date also January 6th, means something else today. Barkai, along with over 20 archaeologists, gathered at the dump to show their solidarity in opposition to the Israel Antiquities Authority decision to downplay the walk's destructive activities. The rally slogan was "Archaeology trash." Barkai spoke, and he said, "We've been given a corpse after its murder. This is a terrible disaster for archaeology." Meanwhile, the Supreme Court ruled that the dig had been done with the necessary permits and was therefore legal to use bulldozers on the Temple Mount. They prioritized safety and security over archaeology and history. So Gabi Barkai and Eilat Mezar, who we spoke about her last week as a little girl, and we're going to talk about her more next week in our City of David excavations, they lead a new organization called the Committee for the Prevention of the Destruction of Antiquities of the Temple Mount. They write an open letter to Prime Minister Ehud Barak, publish it in the media, denouncing serious acts of vandalism and massive destruction on the part of the Waqf. The petition urged the government to make the Temple Mount more accessible to all visitors. It united secular and religious, right-wing and left-wing. As most archaeologists themselves were secular and left-wing, yet they felt a strong connection to the Jewish connection to the land, which was being destroyed by the Waqf and approved by the Ehud Barak government. All of this is happening in the beginnings of the second Intifada. This is a short video of the Temple Mount Sifting Project talking about some of the discoveries since, archaeologists basically went to this trash, and there currently is a sifting project that's ongoing where you can take part and go through the trash to find some treasures.
The Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the place where heaven and earth meet. It is the most politically contested site on the planet. And so no archaeological excavation has ever taken place here. Now, for the first time in the history of Jerusalem, we have the opportunity to reveal the hidden treasures that are buried in its soil.
In 1999, while I was a student of archaeology, I heard about an illegal excavation that took place in the Temple Mount. A huge pit had been illegally bulldozed deep into the Temple Mount. Together with other intrigued students, we examined the dumps and realized that they could be a treasure trove of information about the Temple Mount. The significance of the finds led us to establish a project for systematically sifting the soil from the Temple Mount.
The Temple Mount is inaccessible to archaeologists. The finds unearthed in the sifting project cast a new light on the history and archaeology of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. This is a very rare and once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to discover original finds originating from the Temple Mount. In this process of work, we locate, analyze, process, study, categorize, as well as prepare for publication many tens of thousands of artifacts which otherwise would have been thrown away.
Our finds tell the story of the many generations of the Temple Mount. They include fragments of magnificent public buildings, jewelry, beads, thousands of ancient coins, figurines, arrowheads, fragments of inscriptions on stone and pottery, dice and game pieces, and much more.
We've recovered numerous geometric, multicolored floor tiles from the Second Temple period that have enabled us to begin to reconstruct what Herod's Temple Mount courts may have looked like.
These finds, if left unpublished, will have no effect on the archaeological research regarding the Temple Mount and will be as though never found.
Our main target now is to come up with a proper scientific report, publication that will encourage an educated debate and educated discussion of the entire history of the Temple Mount.
One of our most exciting finds is a half-shekel silver coin, dated to the time of the Second Temple period. This coin symbolizes public responsibility towards the most spiritual center.
The future of the Temple Mount is in your hands. Your half shekel will help tell the story of the Temple Mount.
Okay, so that video was a promotion for the book, but it does tell the story it's worthwhile to watch to just hear the story in the 3-minute video. And as you can see, after 12 years of work, they've found 500,000 artifacts from all periods of Jewish history, including pottery from the First Temple period, Herod's Temple, and afterwards. And while all of this is going on, Bill Clinton is pushing for a second round of peace talks with Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat. During these negotiations, Arafat said, quote, "The Temple Mount is more precious to me than everything else." Barak said, "The Temple Mount is the Archimedean point of our existence, the anchor point of the Zionist struggle." The New York Times terms, quote, "the single most explosive piece of real estate on the planet is the sacred platform." During negotiations, neither side would budge on the Temple Mount. On July 17th of the year 2000, and by the way, my timing was wrong. Before, when I mentioned January 2000, that was before the Intifada. So the story happened before because the second Intifada broke out September of 2000. So this is now in July, 2 months before the second Intifada breaks out, but after they discovered the Temple Mount, trashing that they were doing. Under pressure from Bill Clinton, Barak agrees that there could be a Palestinian rule in the city's Arab neighborhoods. The old city would be split between Israeli control over Jewish and Armenian quarters. The Palestinians would control the Muslim and Christian quarters. Israel would maintain sovereignty over the platform. Jews would be allowed to pray there, but the Palestinians would be the custodians. No excavations could be allowed except under an international regime. Clinton called Barak the bravest man he had ever met. Arafat agreed, except for the Israeli sovereignty over the Temple Mount and allowing Jews to worship on the platform. Bill Clinton was infuriated by Yasser Arafat, who refused to acknowledge that there were Jewish temples that once stood there. Clinton was a devout Southern Baptist. He told Arafat, "In our Bible, the place is called the Temple Mount because the Jewish temple stood there. It is impossible to ignore the rights of the Jews on the Temple Mount." And he almost shouted at Yasser Arafat. Arafat refused to back down, insisted there was no archaeological evidence for the Jewish temples on the platform, suggested they were located elsewhere. He suggested in Nablus, even suggested Yemen and Saudi Arabia as possibilities.
Sure.
It was almost, yeah, it was almost comical. The American president citing scripture while the devout Muslim demanded scientific proof. Clinton banged his fist on the table and said, "You're leading your people and the entire region to disaster." Yasser Arafat on many occasions stated that the Israelis have been digging since 1967 under the Temple Mount and have never found archaeological proof for the temple. Is this accurate? Well, according to archaeologists, they're not convinced of any physical evidence confirming the existence of either temples, but there are so many artifacts that relate to it that, it could really be argued that there is strong archaeological proof of the temple's existence, but nothing that's, clear-cut clincher in that debate. In 2013, you know what? There's actually, I think I wanted to show you guys one last thing, and maybe we'll end off with this. In the Camp David, I know it's a bit of a tangent, but in Camp David, the body language experts actually refer to this meeting of Bill Clinton and, more importantly, Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat in Camp David. They can write books on the body language between this short 30-second clip. Watch this. And we'll end on this note. I know it's not archaeology, but it is the politics that relates to the archaeology of the Temple Mount.
That would be answering a question. Thank you.
And it's quite funny.
Thank you.
This is in 2000, Camp David, July 2000. I mean, psychologists, psychiatrists, political analysts, body language experts can have a field day with that little scene over there. Anyways, that's where we're ending today in the year 2000. And our last and final class on Monday night, we're going to talk about from the year 2000 till, I would say, 2022, pre-October 7th. Although, there isn't that much to say about October 7th in archaeology, other than archaeologists, unfortunately, have been using their expertise for, looking for remains in the kibbutzim, etc. But we're going to go back to the year 2000, talk about the last 20 years, mostly in the city of David. And thank you all so much. And I'll see you Monday night.
Thank you.
So,
Was excellent again.
Thank you. My pleasure. Nice seeing all of you. Take care.
Thank you
So
very much.
interesting. Thank you.